I just want to introduce our speaker and thank her for the time here taken. So Deb Culley is our executive vice chairman in the Department of Anesthesia here at the Brigham and Women's Hospital. She's the past president of the American Board of Anesthesia. And this is the third and last program in the series we put together that really was going to focus on continuing professional development, CPD, and the attempt to kind of think about this, where it's going, where it's been, and how education is evolving to do this more effectively. So we were able to talk in our first series with Bob Birnbaum about kind of why we do it and how we're doing it better. Our second one then was Dr. Hambovic, and speaking, really looking in detail at the New England Journal platform as it is used for both its technological prowess and also CPD abilities to further that process. But this last one is really neat to me, and I'm really excited to hear this because it's getting into the very practical aspects of how all these ideas were operationalized into success. And in the moment now is what our anesthesiologists do across the US and frankly across the world, engaging in this platform. And Dr. Culley here was instrumental in really planning this and launching it. So with that introduction and a huge thanks to Deb for doing this, I'm going to turn it over to her, share her slides, and allow her to take it forward. Thank you, Deb.
I'd like to really start by thanking you, Eric, for the opportunity to be here today. It's really a very spectacular opportunity to share with you as well as other interested individuals those things about MoCA Minute, which really I think make it very unique from some of the other things that you'll see here today or have seen in the past. I, of course, like everybody else, have a few little disclosures, and they include the fact that I am a director of the ABA. And so, of course, I have my biases related to that, and I will try to keep them in check because they do have some implication with regards to what it is that we've done here. As you know, I chaired the MoCA committee of the American Board of Anesthesiology when we went through a transformational process where I was fortunate enough to work with a very large group of wonderful and very enlightened individuals who really wanted to move from our traditional high stakes examination to a system that was both of and for learning and included opportunities for individual engagement in between the ABA directors and the diplomates that we serve. So the things I'd like to share with you today is kind of our evolution from a traditional cognitive examination to MoCA Minute, the tools that we use to support lifelong learning and quality improvement. I'm going to share with you an example of how this type of a learning opportunity can really push out new information really quickly, which is something that we did during COVID back in February and March, and some of the future directions, because one of the things that our board believes in is this concept of continuous quality improvement. Of course, as individuals, we always want to get a little bit better, but I think it's very unique for a board to say, hey, we don't know it all, and we're going to continue to move forward, but we're going to do so in a thoughtful manner that includes diplomate engagement and research about the products that we're trying to develop. When we talk about our traditional Part 3 or the cognitive examination at the American Board of Anesthesiology, it was very typical with regards to all of the maintenance of certification exams for the 24-member boards of the American Board of Medical Specialties. It included a cognitive exam. It needed to occur in years 7 to 10 of everybody's MoCA cycle. You could take it early, you didn't get penalized for that, and your cycle wouldn't restart until after year 10. And they can take the exam twice a year, but you had to go into one of these Pearson VUE centers in order to take it. When you went to the Pearson VUE Medical Center, you had to give them a fingerprint as well as your driver's license. So you kind of felt like a criminal even before you got there. The content was based on the entire content area of the entirety of anesthesiology. But a lot of individuals, such as myself, are very highly specialized. So much of what was being shared was not relevant to their practice, and they had to answer all 20 questions. You couldn't opt out. For the directors of the ABA, it felt like we were kind of telling them, pass the exam or you're out. We're going to tell you what you need to do. And we were Ivy Tower professors telling those who were actually in the trenches, who were doing the work, that they needed to know every piece of the minutia about the subspecialty, even though oftentimes those pieces of information were not relevant to what they were doing on a day-to-day basis. The high stakes examination really failed to respect those individuals who really knew as much and perhaps often more than we did about the evaluation process or what would work well for them. And these practitioners, if we did throw them out of the ABA, we recognized they were not going to stop practicing. They were going to continue to practice. But if you have individuals who don't have the knowledge that they need continuing to practice, we felt like we were really not living up to our mission, which was to maintain the higher standards in the practice of anesthesiology. And we believed that it was exactly those individuals who were failing the exam that needed the greatest deal of our help. And so we developed MOCA 2.0, which is an extension of our original maintenance of certification program. And the goals here were very, very simple. It was to develop a web-based lifelong learning platform that promotes and supports personal knowledge acquisition, assessment, and your demonstrations of proficiency. This idea of MOCA 2.0 was born out of a 2012 technology summit, and it was about transforming assessment proficiencies and blurring the lines between evaluation and learning. Because you can learn from your evaluation, in particular if you get feedback, but you can identify those areas in which you need to learn if you failed something. And there's a lot of data to suggest that failure actually enhances your learning more than passing. We also collected 10 years of programmatic data and diplomate feedback because we wanted to figure out what they felt we should incorporate into our program. What were they going to consider to be relevant and valuable? In other words, we brought our diplomates into the fold, and rather than sitting on the ivory tower, we engaged them and asked them to help us make this project better. The MOCA 2.0 output was designed to be a learning platform that promotes and supports personal knowledge acquisition, assessment, and a demonstration of proficiencies by integrating multiples of the program's component. Where we wanted to be as a part of the development of MOCA 2.0 and MOCA Minute was we're in a position where we were more about improving the knowledge base of all of our diplomates rather than sorting them into the good and the bad categories. And I hope to share with you that we have done that. To do so, we used very sound research efforts in order to determine where we were and where we wanted to go. And so we surveyed our diplomates to find out those things that they felt were troublesome or very positive about our maintenance of certification program. And as you can see here, it wasn't just enough to do the research to find out what it was. We wanted to publish it before we had made any changes so our diplomates knew that we were A, hearing them, and B, we were going to make changes. Out of all of the components of our maintenance of certification process, the once every 10-year exam was considered to cover trivial or unimportant topics, and they really did not like the idea of having to go to a Pearson VUE Center in order to do so. The other thing that was important that we're not going to talk about here today is our Part 4 activities or improvement in medical practice, which is something that we've continued to work on, and maybe at some other point in time we can talk about that. So in our evolution from MOCA 1.0 to MOCA 2.0, we had a number of opportunities to develop our strategic plan. In 2011, the board discussed how advances in technology and learning sciences could help diplomates learn and retain their medical knowledge and incorporate these concepts into MOCA Minute would become a part of the board's strategic plan. In 2012, the board hosted a technology summit to identify approaches for evaluating proficiency and incorporating technology into the ABA assessment system. And in 2013, we outlined our vision for a more personalized MOCA program and created a MOCA redesign task force that consisted of diplomates who are going to help us figure out how it was we were going to design their maintenance of certification program. This MOCA task force was instrumental in moving things forward, and it helped us to understand how different people work and how they learn. So, for example, many people complained that people were required to participate in MOCA Minute questions that were irrelevant to their practice. I'm a neuroanesthesiologist. I never do cardiac anesthesiology, but I would get those cardiac anesthesiology questions and was expected to know information about them. So that was really very important with regards to our growth and development. In 2014, we developed a MOCA Minute 2.0 prototype, and we had a users group that really helped provide feedback on the prototype and developed that initial MOCA Minute pilot. To take it a little bit further, by the time 2018 rolls around, we'd launched this pilot in 2016, but by the time 2018 came around, yes, it took a full 7 years. We had approval for this MOCA Minute to be a permanent component of our maintenance of certification program and remove the once every 10-year exam because of some of the data that I'm going to show you. The MOCA Minute pilot had a number of objectives, and it was a really fun opportunity to try to think about incorporating adult learning theory to provide a continuous and dynamic assessment of knowledge using questions that were similar to those on the MOCA exam, but then to also not just evaluate how well they did, but to provide them an opportunity to review and refresh their knowledge, and would allow them an opportunity to quickly assess their knowledge and their knowledge gaps, and ultimately bring them to resources that they could use to strengthen their expertise. When going through this redesign of MOCA, the brand considered a couple of things about these adult learners. The first is that they're all internally motivated and self-directed. We didn't become physicians because we were the person that didn't want to learn. We are active learners. We bring life experiences and knowledge to learning. In other words, many of us have been in practice 5, 10, 20 years. And so the practice experience is important in two ways. Sometimes you learn that the things that you thought were correct are wrong, but also it allows you to share different perspectives on things. They are practical individuals. They do not want their time wasted for a minute, and they'd like to be respected. And so as a part of the development process, we really wanted that to be a component. We wanted them to be engaged. So we developed something called the MOCA Minute app. And this was designed for a group of individuals who are going to take our maintenance of certification examination in, I think it was the year 2013. And what we did is we developed this app, and we enrolled people based upon their desire to be enrolled in a research project where we emailed them one question a week from January 6th to June 30th. And each question was only available for 1 week. They were allowed to skip weekly questions or answer it. It was up to them whether or not they wanted to do so. But once they went into the MOCA Minute app, they had 1 minute to answer the question. And the reason we chose 1 minute is it's really hard to look things up on your computer in 1 minute. So we felt that it would allow us ultimately, if we wanted to use that as an evaluation of learning or for learning, that it could actually help us. When the question is answered correctly or incorrectly, the correct answer, and I'll show you this in just a minute, the rationale for the correct answer and the link to additional resources are provided to the diplomate at that particular point in time. So this is an example of a question. It's a very simple question. Which of the following is most likely appropriate treatment for cerebral vasospasm occurring 2 days after a subarachnoid hemorrhage? So you get to choose one of 4. We're changing that now to one of 3 because our data suggests it doesn't matter if you have 3 or 4 distractors, the outcome is pretty much the same because the 5th or 4th distractor is usually not a very good one. After they click the button and send it in, the ABA will send them something that says, your answer is correct. It tells you what the question is, what your answer was, a quick critique of why the correct answer was correct and why the incorrect answers were incorrect, the key point, but perhaps most importantly, it allows them an opportunity down here to go in and then identify key literature that is relevant to that particular project. Now, the goal of this MOCA Minute pilot was simply to try to see whether or not we could get more people to pass the exam, but it turned out to be even a little bit better than that. When we looked at the data, we recognized that those participants who participated in the MOCA Minute scored higher on the exam than diplomates that did not participate. What they didn't know is that the questions that we had given them in the MOCA Minute pilot were the 30 most difficult questions that we'd had on our previous exam. We removed them actually from the exam because we knew that they had all been seeing them. But what we found was that despite having removed those questions from the scoring of the exam, the MOCA Minute participants scored significantly higher on the examination than those that did not participate, even in areas that were not related to the MoCA Minute pilot. In other words, it probably drove a little bit more learning. We got some great Diplomate feedback as a result of that. This is a particular comment here from one of our diplomates stating that it was far better than a single written exam. They could digest one topic readily, and rather than trying to do too much at once, it was as they would with a once every 10-year exam. And I can really relate to this idea of cramming. And there's a lot of evidence that suggests that cramming is not a viable way to learn. But when I took my first 10-year MoCA exam, I had a wonderful experience where I had an NIH grant that was due that Friday and my exam was on Monday. So I diligently opened a book for 2 days and basically read for 12 hours a day, passed my exam, put the book away, and didn't bother to learn for the next couple of years. And that's the type of behavior that we'd like to extinguish. We'd really like to see people studying all the time and really trying to keep up to date. And our hope is that the MoCA Minute will actually do that. Our diplomates who had been very distressed and very bothered by the traditional maintenance of certification exam felt much more positive about this. 67% of them were satisfied or very satisfied, and this was in comparison to the traditional maintenance of certification examination. But we didn't stop there. We recognized that there were going to be individuals who were going to have content areas where they were going to continue to have difficulties in learning. So we created some continuing certification tools to support lifelong learning. We wanted to utilize these tools to connect diplomates to targeted education opportunities based upon the areas of knowledge that they are struggling with or areas that they can actually build upon. We wanted to utilize continuous longitudinal assessment and dynamic education tools to improve the diplomate's fund of knowledge, rather than cramming information into your brain that you could promptly ignore after you'd finished your exam. We really wanted them to stay with it. We really wanted them to continue to learn throughout the entirety of their life. And we also wanted to provide a learning and assessment resource that was relevant to many different practice types. So we allowed individuals to tell us where their primary area of practice was, and we would guide some questions in there. So if you're a cardiac anesthesiologist, you'd get a few more cardiac, and neuroanesthesiologist would get a few more neuro. But the majority of the questions were going to be the core questions or knowledge base that we expected our diplomates to develop and maintain. Because we wanted individuals to compare themselves to one another, we developed a knowledge assessment report, and that really could help diplomates to understand where was your performance relative to your peers. And what you can see here is here's the question and the key point. It's not all spelled out here yet. And then your peer performance. Well, if your peers are only doing 64% and you're only doing 64%, probably none of you are doing really well. That means either the question is bad or we've got a group of diplomates that really need to learn that information. And we utilize this data information with regards to peer performance and go back and evaluate those questions where it's low. What you can see here is that there's always not only the question, but some key points. But perhaps more importantly, there's an opportunity to click here to identify available CME activities that will help you to close that cognitive deficit. And I think that that's really very important to individuals who are promoting self-learning. That button will take them into something called our CME Explorer. We've created it to aggregate Category 1 CME activities, including patient safety activities, in a convenient location. It's produced by more than 100 specialties and subspecialty providers. You can get to it within their portal when they're doing their MoCA Minute. We currently have over 950 CME activities that are available, and the ABA has chosen not to produce any of that CME activity because we really don't think that we should be making money off from something that we're requiring. So that's kind of a global quick picture of the MoCA Minute and kind of how it's organized, the fact that it does work. And in 2018, we had approval for that to be a component of our maintenance of certification exam. But we're using it for more than that. Oftentimes, we want to make sure that people are keeping up with their knowledge base, but every once in a while, there's this little thing called a crisis. And right now, our most recent version has been the COVID crisis. So because of our MoCA Minute platform and its adaptability, the ABA decided in very short order that we would send 10 to 15 MOCA Minute questions out to our diplomates. Now, before that, we had told ABA diplomates that if they did not meet their requirements in 2020, we were not going to make them repeat that year, that this year was in essence a bye because of all of the hard work that they were doing taking care of our patients. But because of that, we let them know that we had sent out recently to all of them 10 to 15 questions that involved knowledge about COVID. And so roughly 25 to 35 diplomates received in very short order, 10 to 15 questions that would help them identify their knowledge of COVID. It included not only the questions, the distractors, but also up-to-date information and data so that they could learn about something in a crisis very, very quickly. It's something that we're excited about. I had mentioned that we're a board that really strongly believes that we want to have our diplomates participate and be involved in our maintenance certification program. It shouldn't just be all of us sitting in our ivory tower telling people what should be done. And that this is going to be a continuous evolutionary program where we're going to be guided by research and our diplomates with regards to the type of things that we need to do. So as a result from that, we are working now on MOCA 3.0. It involves the development of a completely new ABA website that allows you to have equal access, whether or not you're on a computer, a tablet, or a phone, because a lot of our diplomates prefer to answer questions on phones, others prefer to answer them on the website, and still others on things like an iPad. So it required a significant amount of adaptability on our part to recognize that we needed to make all of those platforms available with all of the information. It was a request from our diplomates. But we're also continuing to work not only with that, but looking at how MOCA 3.0 can be better. And part of that is what's the customer experience? So we really do spend an incredible amount of time surveying our diplomates. And in January, you'll see this seamless digital experience being rolled out. They'll be able to log into their portal from almost anywhere. They'll be able to launch a new mobile ABA MOCA Minute app, and they'll be able to access it almost any place in the world that they need to. Why is that? It's because we were fortunate enough to have a MOCA users group that helped us redesign our portal and our mobile app, because these are the people that are going to use it. As you can see here, the old woman in the room is me, trying to work with all of these very wonderful, excellent individuals who are significantly younger than I was, who really wanted to see things change. And they recognized that it was their time to be able to develop the MOCA of their future and what they want to see in that future. So right now we're at the point where we're trying to work through our MOCA 3.0. We've gotten through our customer experience. Now we're going to go on and move into something that's a little bit more exciting. We're going to incorporate integrated learning tools such as micro and in-situ learning. We're also going to be designing to offer credit for participation in things like on-the-job learning. Do you go over and consult your best friend because your friend is the expert in mediastinal masses and you're not? Yeah, well, both of you can get credit for that because you're both trying to improve your knowledge as well as your medical practice. And so we're trying to continue to evolve and develop more and more projects and products that can help you will add meaning to your practice rather than just having you take a test for the purpose of taking tests. I think the last thing that I'd like to really leave you with is this idea that continuous quality improvement is not just something that's on the practitioner. I think any governing body or group of individuals who are trying to educate others need to recognize that you're starting at a current state, but you really want to get to that future state. And once you get there, the onus is upon you to go back and recognize that what your future state was previously is now your current state. And how can you develop the technology, the processes, and get the right people involved to move you to that next step of future state where not only are we able to demonstrate that we've got improvements on examinations, but perhaps even more importantly, that we can have an effect on patient outcomes. So I'd like to thank all of you and ask you if you have any questions. We're here to answer them, and really thank Eric for inviting me to be here today.
Thank you, Deb. That was wonderful. And what a story, over 10 years at least. And I have a question to start a little bit here, which is, when I think of maintenance certification in any field, I think of it as some sort of an attempt to try and maintain people digging into the knowledge over that period of time, 10 years, whatever it is. But then often there is kind of this high stakes, test, as you mentioned. Can you clarify, has the MOCA 2.0 overcome that last step? If anesthesiologists were able to keep up with these questions, one a day, one a week, whatever it might be, do they then get exempted from that higher stakes endpoint?
So Eric, that's a really good question, and it's something that's very important. We want people to be continuously learning, and we don't want them to learn out of stress where they can very quickly forget what it is that they've learned. And so yes, if you participate in the MOCA Minute and meet a minimal threshold, so it does have a threshold, it's fairly low because we want people to remain in rather than be kicked out, you will meet the requirement for your cognitive exam. And actually, we have the cognitive exam only as the backup if you fail it, because we've decided that this way of learning from our perspective is so much superior that we didn't even want to just allow them to have the opportunity to just take the exam. In the event that they fail it, we have something called an Aspire exam, and that's basically you're aspiring to regain your certificate, and they can take that for 3 years after they have failed their exam for the last time. It's really important, though, to recognize that we have not seen that many people that are failing it, and we actually track those that are, and rather than just let them fail and fall off the board, we contact them, and we ask them, what is it that's going on in your life, and are there things that we can do to help you? And it's been amazing. Some people have been really ill and in the hospital for, like the last 6 months or something out of the last couple of years. You're not back up to speed, and they really weren't ready to take that exam. Other individuals study or practice within our subspecialties solely. People who just do critical care medicine or pain medicine were very highly likely to fail it. And we had one person who had just had a baby right before her exam, and I'm not saying that women who just had babies can't do great taking the exam, because we certainly know that they can, but obviously another stressor in your life. And so we do allow people an opportunity to actually not participate in the MOCA Minute for up to 3 months out of each 5-year period of time, in the event that they have a major life event, because A, even if they're participating, they're not going to be learning, but B, we don't want to add that burden or stress to them during a difficult time in their career.
Well, and I think just to kind of put a little emphasis on it, the incentives that drive learning are many. And sometimes they're negative incentives, and other times they're positive. But I think there's a real balance here you found of engaging the constituency into what they wanted. And then the incentive became almost duplicative for them, that everyone wants to learn how to care for their patient as best as they can in an efficient manner that takes away this big high stakes thing that's daunting down the road. And I think that's the awareness I have here of how you operationalize such an important educational system. Questions from others? I have excuse me, one other question. How many people use the app versus the computer? And do you see that was, how much are the little things like that important to certain generations of learners?
It's about 50-50 right now, and that's probably evenly divided. We actually know that it's different between younger and older individuals. It's becoming progressively more important as everybody becomes IT savvy to have the non-computer based, I want to do it on my phone, I want to do it on my tablet, I want to do it wherever I want to do it. And we encourage people to do that, although we tell them, don't do it when you're in an airport, because I like to play with the app. And so, I'll be in an airport in between flights going someplace before COVID. And I make a lot of mistakes because I wasn't really concentrating. So the questions are at least difficult enough that you have to pay attention and concentrate. So find yourself in a quiet room where you can actually do this. I think was one of the important things that we learned. Part of the reason for MOCA 3.0 is this transition to a more iPad or IT savvy balance. And then there were also a few glitches in the online version, so we wanted to get rid of them so that the user interface was more seamless. That was very important from our perspective.
I bet there's also, and I'll open it up to others here. Nareth, I know you're trying to jump in. I bet there's also on some level a cost savings to the user in the sense that so many learners are engaging in a for-profit question bank scenario, often in advance of a high-stakes test. But you've almost developed your own internal to the ABA, like you said, where they can learn for just their annual dues, if you will. Is that, am I getting that right? Am I accurate in that statement?
It's similar. They probably do save the financial benefits of not taking courses, which we try to encourage people not to take courses because they don't really work all that well. But it is as expensive to administer this exam as it was to do the other. And in many ways, it's actually more expensive simply because we've got all the IT infrastructure to develop for so many different individuals. So it's required a pretty heavy IT lift, but I think the rewards really come when you hear diplomates say things like, thank you for helping me keep up to date. Thank you for sending those COVID questions. I didn't know what I should be doing, but obviously I should have been doing something. So I think that those benefits are really of value. And then you don't have to take a day off work to go to a Pearson VUE Center. You can really do this at your convenience when it works for you. And if we look at our younger learners, that's really the world in which they live. They don't live in the world where Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, you sit in a class. Most of them are recorded and they're listening to them at the place that makes it more valuable for them.
Nareth, I'm going to pull you in. I see your question, but maybe I'll just...
Wonderful. Yeah, thanks, Dr. Kelly. It's so inspiring. I've heard about the MOCA Minute for a long time. I'm seeing the boards the other boards sort of make slow steps, maybe transitioning to you can do a few questions at a time. But I would love to know if hopefully you've been approached by other boards, or is anybody else using it? And then is there any way we can share resources that you've worked so hard to develop?
So that's a really great question. And what I didn't tell you is that I was chair of the Continuing Certification Committee of the American Board of Medical Specialties when all of this was going on. So when I started to bring this type of information to that board and to the committee, I was told this is never going to happen. Don't bother. So we backed off and made it a research project. And eventually, by the time I finished my tenure as chair of that committee 4 years later, not only was our maintenance of certification project, the MOCA Minute, approved as a part of our continuing learning opportunity, but 22 of the 24 member boards had some sort of a longitudinal assessment as a part of their maintenance certification program. The American Board of Medical Specialties has a very similar longitudinal process or platform that they use, but our board has also helped other groups of individuals. So if you're interested in something like this for your board or for other groups along the way, in particular in the ABMS member community, you can just call the American Board of Anesthesiology and start having the conversation, or you can send me an email and I will forward it to the office staff because they deal with those things. We really do believe that this is the right way to go. We're changing. It's not just going to be MOCA Minute anymore. It's going to be additional learning opportunities because we want to evolve as well. But I think that willingness of other boards to consider it and move in similar processes has been very rewarding.
Martin.
Can I just ask a quick question, Eric?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, Dr. Cully, this was wonderful, and it's really enlightening to see that the American Board of Anesthesia, really takes into account adult learning theory, and I just think that's phenomenal. I also know that the American Board of Anesthesia has used simulation as one means of maintaining certification. I just want to understand how you've integrated the work that you're doing with the cognitive piece with the practical piece.
Yeah, that's a very, very good question. And as you know, maintenance of certification is complicated. It's broken up into parts. So we've got the cognitive component, which is our cognitive evaluation, which is traditionally the part 2. And there were these part 4 projects which were quality improvement. And we allow our diplomates, if they do a 1-day simulation course through an ASA, not ABA, specifically our subspecialty society, approved courses, they can get all 25 of their improvement in medical practice points simply by doing that. And we very strongly encourage simulation. For other types of simulation, you can get 1 point for every hour that you've participated. One of the things that we've really recognized recently is that many of our more experienced practitioners really do not have the experience in quality improvement or even the knowledge of how to create a quality improvement program. So one of the things we're going to try to do in MOCA 3.0 is develop a mechanism by which they can use a credit from MOCA Minute or whatever other longitudinal assessment process that we have to learn about continuous quality improvement, so they can get the continuous quality improvement as well as their MOCA Minute exam components by doing something, one thing. And we're really trying to encourage this ability to integrate those components in a manner very similar to what Charles was suggesting, you know. So you do your questions, you're not doing so well, you go to simulation and you pull all of that together to try to improve what it is that you're doing.
Thank you.
Martin.
Hi, Dr. Cully. My name is Martin Pusick. I'm a pediatrician and I'm an examiner for the American Board of Pediatrics.
Which is also in Raleigh, North Carolina.
That's what I was about to say, was that there's gradual shift from the 10-year exam to MOCA minutes. And it's interesting writing questions from the inside, how different that is in the sense of emphasis on teaching and on explaining as opposed to the emphasis on, assessing. So that in the writing of the questions, there's a different process and a richer process all told. So I want to endorse the anesthesiologist leadership in this and congratulate you on this work. It's absolutely fantastic.
Thank you. But you know, the American Board of Pediatrics had a lot of influence on us as well, because we're so close, in such close proximity. We are executive directors. We're constantly talking about what can we do, how can we do it better, and our programs turned out to be a little bit different. But I think that the similarities definitely outweigh the differences between them.
Fantastic. I was part of an American Medical Association effort to create a model of lifelong learning, and I was and so that was part of the AMA's consortium, Change Med Ed, and they came up with this idea of the master adaptive learner, and I'm struck by the similarities between the, I think, second to last slide that you showed with looking for CQI, and that they had developed a model, and I was part of that effort to create kind of a personal CQI, a personal PDSA cycle in which you identify gaps, which is clearly an important part of MOCA, and then work on those gaps and then monitor your knowledge with the reports that you develop and the like. And one of the key parts of the AMA model was the idea that you learn something, but then you go out and change the system, and that there's an interplay between you, the individual, getting better, and once you're better, advocating for doing better in the system itself. And so that so I just wanted to point that out just as an analogy to the work that you display.
So Martin, that's actually very important. I think it's interesting to note that while we insist that our diplomates answer their questions on their own, they are completely free to discuss that information and share it with their colleagues. So my greatest highlight in all of this was walking into the anesthesia duty room at the Brigham and Women's Hospital and have 4 people in a deep conversation about one of these questions that had gone out that they were certain were wrong. And they were, one side said it was wrong, the other side said it was right. And that's exactly what we want to do. We don't care whether or not they're ABA diplomates. The only way to promote the highest standard in the practice of anesthesiology is to allow them to share that information with those individuals that are not board certified. And I think we're equally engaged in that. And I don't know who won that argument that day in the duty room, but it sure went silent the moment I walked in.
But if I may, what we're finding within my little sub-board is that you can now write questions where the answer is controversial. And so that you can get to an area where you really get the juices flowing. Whereas on the other exam, you had to be completely certain that C was the right answer. And so anything that was close to C or might be, you had to choose your questions in that way. And so again, the response processes that this is engendering is just tremendous. And I salute you in this work.
Well, it's funny because the other thing I didn't tell you about is that for every question, there's a button they can push to provide feedback. And we see that, well, this is right. And there's two sides to every story, but at least the conversation is happening and they're thinking about what it is that they're doing. So
that discussion always makes me reflect that most of us in medicine train really with this basis of the physical sciences guiding everything, right? And then you start to have this discussion, and we've fully leaped over into acknowledging how education's a social science, and the sociology of the process is probably what made this work. It's not that there's not a right or wrong answer. It's how a system kind of comes to grow itself, right? In a way that they value it and embrace it. So I think that's always so fun to think about. Let's see, Christina, did we get any other questions that had come up?
Yeah, our BEI medical librarian, Sue Worthman, had a question about, I think, determining what questions you're no longer going to use, and also a little bit about tools in the platform. Sue, are you able to unmute yourself and elaborate?
Yeah, I was just a little bit confused. She lost me when she was talking about how they removed the most difficult questions from the board exam and they incorporated them into the app and the platform. And I just was a little confused as to what did they do and how did that help learners?
Yes, so there are two things with regards to the quote unquote the most difficult questions. The most difficult questions means that people got them wrong most often. And so we will go back anytime we see a low percentage of people getting it right, something that looks close to guessing or, below the 50th percentile in particular, reevaluate those questions to make sure that the right answers are right, the wrong answers are wrong. And sometimes we get it wrong. And oftentimes then we go back to all of the information that's been put in there by our diplomates to tell us why things are wrong. So the other thing that you're talking about was with regards to that MOCA Minute pilot, where we did not include those most difficult 50 questions in the exam. Now, it wasn't 50. It really turned out to be about 15 or 20 that was actually in that exam. And the reason why we removed them is that everyone had seen them. I mean, we know that they did really well on those questions, so they'd obviously maintained their learning, but we didn't want to skew the outcome of the exam as a result of it. But what was most interesting is that those individuals who participated actually did better even in other content areas. So those are two separate things. One is how we did the pilot or operationalized the pilot, and the other one is our QI to determine whether or not our questions are reasonable or whether or not we got it wrong.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Deb, you mentioned this, but I think it's worth 1 minute just for you to expand on it a little bit, which is the system that's been created here by the ABA at its core is on continuing the individual to get better and be competent, right? So it'll impact patient care. But you did mention a really unique aspect, which is when you have then engaged this willing cohort that is part of the learning process, if you will, in perpetuity, you can push out content that is urgent, emergent, new and novel, that, you mentioned COVID. And I guess, how often does that happen? What are your thoughts on that? That's an added value that I just think flew under the radar almost there a little bit.
Yeah, so the COVID issue, we started that actually with Ebola. When Ebola first reared its ugly head, we recognized it was unlikely to be a major issue here, but we wanted to have our diplomates prepared. We were still in that pilot stage, and we really wanted to be able to share with the American Board of Medical Specialties, this is a really quick way to get information out to all of your diplomates. So we could show that we had, like within 3 days of sending out the Ebola question, 30,000 people that had answered the question. Whether or not it was right or wrong from our perspective didn't matter because it was the learning process that was valid. Here we are again, not that many years later, and we've got COVID. But there are also other things that we push out really, really quickly. And I can't give you an example off the top of my head, but one that would work is the number of years when we said really tight glucose control was really important in the perioperative space. And we now know 2 tight of glucose control is associated with worse outcomes. Once that next paper or two came out demonstrating that, we can push out Mocha-Minute questions to show our diplomates what the new information is. So for those individuals who aren't necessarily reading on a daily basis, we can send out that information that we think is important with regards to their ability to modify their practice.
So thank you so much, Deb, for taking the time to share all you've done with us and for, I think, inspiring all of us to think about this model educationally in whatever we do. So I hope everyone has a great day. I thank you so much for joining our program, and I look forward to seeing you on the next one. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you all.